Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here, and in today's video we're going to be installing a skid plate on my 2020 Ram Rebel. So this skid plate system is made by a company called RCI, and this is one of many kits that they make for these trucks. So this is the engine skid plate kit, so it's basically going to be a front skid plate that's going to continue right after the bash guard here, and then it's going to stop after the engine. But they make additional kits that you could purchase. They're all kind of modular, and it goes as far back as a transmission skid plate as well as catalytic converter protection plates. So they really got you covered as far as undercarriage protection. So let's take a look at the kit that I have here for my truck. So first thing you'll notice is this is raw aluminum. You can get this in powder coated black steel or also powder coated black aluminum. I went with raw aluminum because I think it'll just match the front skid plate much better. And I know I'm back and forth in terms of painting this black, but for now, since it is that aluminum color, figured let's just keep that aluminum color going underneath the truck. Worst case scenario down the road, I can get this powder coated whatever color I powder coat the bash guard here. But anyway, in addition to the skid plates in the kit, it comes with these side brackets, and I'll talk through how those install in a few minutes here, as well as a ton of hardware. So you can see that bag is all the excess hardware. I think what happens when they send you this kit is they give you enough hardware to do the entire kit, and then all that changes if you order this kit versus the one with the transmission, the catalytic converter plates, is they just send you the extra metal plates for the kit. So you already have that hardware, and the hardware comes with that. Anyways, we're gonna be installing this today underneath the truck. It's very simple, super straightforward, famous last words every YouTuber says. But with one minor modification when it comes to my truck. So if you remember a few weeks back, I installed that pack brake oil filter relocation kit that mounts on the vertical chassis member in front of the truck. We're gonna need to unbolt that so we could slide these side brackets on and then rebolt it back up. Shouldn't be an issue, should be a-okay. But I will say a huge shout out to the RCI team. I actually sent them an email a few weeks ago because I wanted to verify before I went ahead with the whole kit itself. I wanted to see if they could send me the brackets so I could test fit them to see if they'll work with my oil filter relocation kit. They will. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and install them. So anyway, very simple installation. We're going to move this portion out of the way because we don't need that just yet. And we're just going to look at the front plate. So like I said, these brackets are what holds the front of the plate to the truck, and they essentially mount to the side of the skid plate. So you got some carriage bolts here. Carriage bolts fit right into those square slots, and that's how you bolt these to there. Best thing they do or recommend in the instructions is to put on the brackets, put these brackets, attach them to the skid plate before you put them up underneath the truck. I can only do, what is that? My driver's side, because again, on the passenger side, I'm gonna have to install the bracket first next to my oil filter relocation bracket, and then I will have to add these bolts after the skid plate's up into place. So I can only do one side. All right, so we are up underneath the truck, and these are the vertical members that I'm talking about. Let's see if I can get a little bit more light there. All right, these are the vertical members I'm talking about, and there are two holes from the factory in the front of that bracket facing, I guess, the cab. So we have our metal bracket here, and all these do is just bolt right to that vertical bracket. So you can see that's where, this is the tab here where my pinky's at, where it's gonna attach to the skid plate. I said I was gonna have some challenges. Let's get that light moved over a little bit. So here's my pack brake oil filter relocation kit. It's a big bracket that mounts to the exact same position. So what I need to do is unbolt this. I need to slide in the new RCI bracket and then rebolt everything together. So basically sandwich the RCI bracket between the pack brake bracket and then the vertical member. But for the sake of timing, let's go ahead and install the bracket on the front skid plate on the driver's side, and then I'll install the passenger plate here, and then we'll start working with the plate installation. Also worth noting, while I'm underneath here, again, this is the big opening that we're going to be covering up with that skid plate. This Rebel comes with an engine skid plate already, so we're going to be removing this and replacing it with the RCI piece. It's going to give us wider coverage, but it also is going to allow us to run that front skid plate as well, whereas this one would not allow that. So we're going to need to remove this guy before we install anything, but let's go and install the one side of the brackets on the skid plate and get it up underneath here, and we'll start talking through how the hardware. All right, so I went ahead and prepared the front skid plate again, but I did do one side, left it loose, so there's some adjustments here, just enough so I could slip a bolt in there. Speaking of bolts, you're going to be using some M10 with 2 washers on each one, and then a nylon lock nut. The nut itself goes on the inside of the member, and then the bolt goes on the outside. It's going to thread through just like this into that existing piece. Also, while I was underneath the truck, I went ahead and removed the factory engine skid plate. Looking at the RCI one versus the OEM, you can see we're going to get a ton more coverage. And it also looks a hell of a lot better. But anyway, it was 4 15mm bolts, and that guy just drops right out. Wear eye protection. There's a lot of dirt caught up underneath mine. It shot everywhere when I was using an impact. But anyway, now that we got everything out of the way, we can go ahead and start installing everything. So we're going to install the front skid plate first, and then we're going to come back in and install the rear one. So we're going to start by obviously getting this up underneath the truck, getting this bracket installed so I can pivot everything off there, and then I will take 1 or 2 of these M10 bolts and slip it through whatever hole here lines up with the factory engine skid plate holes. I think it's going to be these 2, because then on that third hole you're going to be using this assembly. So it's an M10 bolt, but it's going to thread into a speed nut that has to drop in through the cross member, and I'll show you where you drop this in. But essentially it'll drop in and it'll give you a point on the inside of the skid plate to mount that. Once you install those back 3 bolts, you're going to leave them loose, because if you see those slotted areas, that skid plate's going to slide between the skid plate here and the member, and then you just bolt everything up. So that front portion basically gets sandwiched between this plate and then the front cross member on the truck. All right, so as a reminder, this is the bracket that you're going to be mounting those black side brackets from the skid plate to. So there's 2 holes here. I got better light on there now. You can see one's slotted, one's just a regular hole. You're gonna be dropping the bolts through here and then putting a wrench up through the inside here to tighten down that nylon lock nut. Once you do that, the whole skid plate should hold itself into place. And then, if you remember, I removed the engine skid plate. So the engine skid plate mounted here and to here. So there's 2 threaded inserts on the cross member. We're gonna go ahead and grab 2 M10 bolts. And once we get that skid plate into place, we're gonna thread them in there so it holds the back of that skid plate. Not tight, just enough to keep everything in place. And then this is the hole, so it's on the driver's side where you're going to use that speed nut. And there's actually a hole on the back of this cross member to drop that little piece of metal in so it lines up right about here. And there's actually a notch to keep it into place. And then that bolt's going to come up through here and it's going to thread into the speed nut. I'll show you a little bit more detail. We'll get a little bit better light on there. Okay, so we have our skid plate in place. We got back 2 bolts holding everything on. We got one here, one over there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this little metal tab here. So this metal tab comes with a speed clip installed on it, and we're going to basically drop that tab into this hole on the rear of the cross member, making sure that that hole lines up with the large hole right here so that we could add a 3rd bolt here. Once we do that, we're going to leave it loosely in place just like these, and we'll go get our other skid plate, and that other skid plate is going to slide in right here, and then it'll bolt in to this existing spot and that existing spot. So again, all right, so the skid plate is tightened down and everything is fully installed. You can see there's 2 bolts in the back of that engine skid plate holding that one into place, and then we got our 3 bolts in the middle. This one is tied into a speed nut, but those 2 go into existing threaded holes. And then we have our front here. We have a bracket like this on both sides. We have our carriage bolts here, and then we have the M10 bolts up on the actual factory cross member or factory vertical member holding everything in place, and this thing is damn solid. But let me go ahead and clean up everything, and then we'll get this truck out in the daylight so we can take a look at it, and I'll throw it up on ramp so it's a better angle. But from a overall tightening everything up standpoint, everything was loose up until I had that last plate into place. So once you put that last plate in there, you tighten down those back 2 bolts first, then you go to these middle 3, and then you turn your attention up here because everything just kind of falls into place, and you can see it's about, I don't know, 1/2 inch above the bottom of the bash plate. But tons of coverage here, tons of solid coverage. It blocks a giant opening here so we won't get any sort of crap stuck up in the serpentine belt. Again, I didn't like that there was such a big opening, and that was the reason why I went ahead with the skid plate here. All right, so we have the truck out of the garage, and yes, it is a new day. Ran out of daylight yesterday and just frankly time, so here we are finishing up our video now. So truck is out of the garage, daylight, on ramps. Let's go ahead and take a look at that skid plate system that we installed from RCI. So you can see the skid plates are fully installed. So again, this is the front skid plate here, and then the engine skid plate. This is RCI's engine skid plate kit. Like I mentioned before, they do have additional skid plates that just keep adding onto the system. They go all the way back and protect the catalytic converters and everything else in between, as well as the transmission. Transmission does have a plastic pan on these trucks, so a lot of folks who do a lot of off-roading do opt to have some additional coverage added on their truck. So RCI is a good opportunity to do that. But anyway, from an installation standpoint, before you go ahead and install this guy, you want to throw those side brackets on. In my case, I had the pack brake oil filter relocation kit, and I had to install the bracket first on the truck before installing it here, but I was able to do the driver's side. Then what you want to do is remove the factory engine skid plate. It's just a tiny little guy, 4 bolts, pops right out with a 16mm socket. Then what you're going to want to do is install the front skid plate here. Loosely install those back 2 bolts, so the middle one and then the far right one, and then the closest one on the driver's side. Again, you need to use that speed nut, which drops in behind that front cross member. Once you have all those bolts, at least 1 or 2 threads in, leave the skid plate hanging there. Then you're going to take your rear engine skid plate. It's got those notches. It just slides between this skid plate and the actual truck front cross member. And then you're going to bolt those back 2 bolts into place, and then everything else tightens up. From a tightening standpoint, don't tighten anything. Start from the rear. So tighten those 2 bolts, then tighten these 3. Then you can come up and tighten these last 2 guys, and then you can do the ones on the actual vertical members here. But overall, the skid plate looks great. Give me the protection that I need, and it still allows access to my oil filter, which is up in the front left there, and then also access to my oil drain plug, which I use a Fumoto drain plug. So it's not in the way of anything. If it is, it takes 2 seconds to knock these skid plates off, but they look great. I'm happy I went with the raw aluminum. I think it does look really good with the factory bash guard on the Rebel here. But with that said, that is how you install the RCI skid plates. Maybe I will look at installing additional ones in the future here, but I'm very happy with these ones. Thank you very much for watching. Hope this is helpful, and I will leave all of the links to the products I used, as well as the other versions of these, in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it. Bye.